Okay, folks, it's that time of year again.
Exactly. Stockings are hung by the chimney with care, and we're getting ready for a possible government shutdown here in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so very, very brief, what's happening is that Donald Trump doesn't think much of the money arrangements that are about to pass through Congress. They need to have the votes of Republicans, obviously, in the House of Representatives, who are in the majority there. And he has put pressure on them not to say yes to it, so it doesn't go through. And what doesn't go through, and we've discussed this loads of times on the program, when there isn't the money to fund the federal government, then various things done by the federal government are, at least in theory, closed down.
And as ever, because it wouldn't be an episode of Americast if I didn't mention Elon Musk. Elon Musk has got very, very involved, including on X, where he shared dozens and dozens of posts about this. And there are lots of questions over the impact that he's had on the whole situation as it's unfolded.
Welcome to Americast.
Americast from BBC News.
Hello, it's Marianna, aka Misinformation, in the worldwide headquarters of Americast in London.
And it's Justin, also in London, but at home in South London.
And it's Anthony. I've come into the BBC Bureau in Washington, D.C.
Okay, and we should say when we're talking now, because it's 3:15 in the afternoon in London on Thursday, and I say that because who knows what will have happened by the time you listen to us, but basically what is going on is that there is at least the prospect of the American federal government shutting down, in other words, not being able to pay for various things, and we'll go into what those things are in just a second. And it's happening because the Republican Speaker of the House, of course, controls the money. The Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, could have got a bill through, had Democratic support actually for a bill which they'd come together on to get through, but he didn't pass it quickly enough. And as we're about to hear, Donald Trump got involved, or should I say, President Elon Musk got involved, and the whole thing rather fell apart.
Stop me if you've heard the story before. The Republicans have a very narrow margin in the House of Representatives, and they are unable to keep all of their representatives on the same page. And so they can't, just based on a party line vote, enact some sort of a package that would have kept the government funded. So that's why, as Justin mentioned, Democrats had to come on board and provide some of the votes to get this passed. And as soon as you're relying on Democratic votes, then you have to have at least some kind of a compromise. And so what was happening over the course of the past week or so was that the Republican leadership, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, and his deputies were negotiating with Democrats to come up with a package that would fund the federal government and take care of some other end-of-the-year business, such as replenishing the disaster relief funds that had been depleted by all those hurricanes that hit a few months ago, doing some various healthcare fixes, and there were other odds and ends in here, some of which became controversial. And Elon Musk, who has no official government role, got wind of this just on Wednesday afternoon, and as I think Marianna will explain, took to X and posted, 100 posts on X, condemning everything and throwing all of this into disarray.
Yeah, more than 100 posts over a fairly short period of time. So I think it would be kind of fair enough to call it a sort of frenzy. And that's kind of Elon Musk's MO at the moment, which is he'll choose a topic or a particular thing that he decides to post multiple times about, often sharing other people's posts, quote tweeting them, as we used to call it, and just going really, really hard on a particular issue. What's quite interesting about this is you can go back to Elon Musk's feed and you can kind of just watch this unfold in real time. And some of there were a whole range of posts. Like one of them, there's a kind of network of accounts, big accounts on X, that Elon Musk frequently, and I think network is the right word because they're all quite closely connected with each other. They all interact with each other. Lots of them aren't accounts using their real names. And Elon Musk will frequently reshare those accounts and reply to those accounts. And one of them is this one called DOGE Designer, which is referring to this type of Bitcoin, but obviously Doge is then also the name of this department now, kind of playing on that. And there was this picture which was Elon Musk with a sword, and then this bill, like the stack of papers, and it says "kill the bill" in capitals. And there were just endless posts like that. And Musk himself was repeating all sorts of things, like basically just saying, "Oh, it won't be a problem. Just close the government down. for 33 days. He said specifically, we will be fine for 33 days, close the government down until January 20th, defund everything. He made a kind of variety of claims, some of which people have pushed back on and that do not seem to be true. For example, suggesting that the bill includes a 40% pay increase for members of Congress, when actually it's thought that probably looks more like 3.8% increase, but members have opted out of that raise since ages ago, so 2009. And then he posted, obviously there's a legitimate debate and conversation happening too. Vivek Ramaswamy, who is his co-DOGE person in Donald Trump's mind, at least, if they're appointed to those roles, he reposted something he'd shared basically about how long and kind of arduous the bill is, saying the bill is 1,500 pages long and no one has time to read it. That isn't a bug, it's a feature. So this kind of playing on this efficiency point. But it just raises really important questions about what Elon Musk's role is. And so you wonder, Justin and Anthony, to what extent, this puts Trump in a difficult position, or whether this is what Trump is wanting Elon Musk to do.
Well, I mean, we ought to work out actually what would happen if it were to be passed. In other words, because it's being passed, isn't it, Anthony, because they couldn't actually pass a budget. So it's a kind of cobbled together thing, isn't it? Could we be absolutely factual about what it would or wouldn't do?
Right. I guess you have to understand how the budget process is supposed to work. It's supposed to work where you have various committees, each with their own parts of the federal government that they oversee, such as agriculture and health and infrastructure, transportation and military. And they're all supposed to have committee meetings, and then they're supposed to come up with their budgets funding that part of the government, which then go to the House and they're voted on by the whole House, and then go to the Senate, which does its own committee process, and that's voted on there, and then they agree. The problem is that the federal government is so big now and so unwieldy at times. That's really difficult for this normal operations to work in a timely fashion. So invariably what happens is this budgeting process in the committees only partially gets through or somewhat gets through. Sometimes you do get a bill that gets to the floor of the House, but you get to the end of the year when you're supposed to pass a new budget to fund the government for the next fiscal year. In the meantime, let's just pass what's called a continuing resolution that will fund the government temporarily until we can get a new budget that has new priorities and new programs and cuts and increases and all these different things. But this all got derailed because, as Marianna mentioned, Elon Musk looked at this, and some conservatives looked at this and said, there's all of this spending in here that is being pushed in at the last minute. And they were picking all these little things, and that ended up causing Elon Musk and a lot of these people to call out what they saw as a big wasteful bill. And then Donald Trump did essentially kind of have to run out and get in front of the mob again. I mean, he didn't seem like he was taking a very active role in this and was kind of letting it happen. But now he has had to position himself where now he's one of the ones calling for this to be scrapped and for the government to be shut down until they can come up with a cleaner, trimmer package.
Do you think that's the position he wanted and planned to take, Anthony?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if he wanted to, he should have done it much, much earlier than this. I think he doesn't seem like he really cared about the temporary funding. He kind of figured perhaps that it would all get taken care of once he became president, was sworn in on January 20th, and then he and his people and the new Congress could look at funding the government based on the priorities that they had, that this was a temporary kind of thing that didn't have any consequences. Kind of interestingly, one of the other things that he came out with, a big ask he came out with yesterday as he was shooting down this bill, was that he also wants Congress to raise the debt limit, which is a separate issue, and we've talked about it in the past. It's a statutory requirement that in order to issue new debt, the federal government has to pass, and Congress has to pass how much debt can be issued. And if it doesn't raise it, then the government can't issue any more treasury bills to fund the deficit that the United States government has been running on now for decades. And he wants them to do that now rather than when we hit the debt limit sometime next summer. And that is a debate and a negotiation that he kind of threw in at the last minute, and I think caught a lot of members of Congress totally off guard on this. But now he's saying this has to be done while they fund the government. So it seems very chaotic, and there would have been a much more methodical way for Trump to lead this and to say, this is what I want. And then he might have the chance of getting all those Republicans in the House, the narrow majority, on board to signing off on this and not have to rely on Democratic votes, which is why we got to this point in the first place.
Yeah, you just wonder, don't you, what the politics of this might add up to now. In other words, it's not just who's in charge, although that's one question, which I think is a legitimate one, but it's also who can sort of seem as if they're in charge, who can project power. And I think at the moment, we've been saying for some time, haven't we, that Donald Trump comes into office in January as, I was listening to a constitutional scholar saying the other day, the most powerful president actually in living memory, partly because of the obvious stuff that he's got Republican majorities in Congress, although, as Anthony points out, only a very slim one in the House and possibly not a usable one in the House, but still in charge. And he's got the Supreme Court, as many would say, because of the appointments that he made when he was in office. And he's got the Supreme Court's decision about immunity. Remember this court case which gave sweeping powers of immunity to a president once he leaves office, that he's not going to be prosecuted for things he did. So he's got all of those things, and he's got the kind of political momentum, hasn't he? Because he did win that election. It wasn't exactly a landslide, but he did win pretty convincingly, more convincingly than a lot of people thought he would. And all of those things, you think, well, the guy of the moment, the man of the year, to quote 1,000 newspapers that are all bringing out their person of the year stuff at the moment, is him. And yet there are risks here, aren't there, politically? I mean, if you do have a shutdown, and there are people who, like, I'm thinking of veterans, of other people who might not get the money that they ought to get around Christmas time, and if the Democrats can get themselves together with a proper spokesperson to make the case that it is Trump's fault, then I just want, what's the balance, Anthony, would you say, the politics in all of this?
Well, I think it does start this new administration off on the wrong foot if they can't get their house in order and avoid a government shutdown, at least a longer government shutdown. I think this exposes the weakness of the Republican control of Congress and all the chaos that we saw over the past 2 years, where Republican leadership battles, you had one Speaker of the House get thrown out and Mike Johnson get reinstalled after a long, arduous battle, and all these internal divisions where you had right-wingers in the House of Representatives derailing plans that the establishment and the leadership wanted to do, and vice versa. All of that hasn't gone away. And it might be even more pronounced in the new Congress, because the Republican majority come next year is going to be even more narrow than the one now. So if Donald Trump can't show that he can wrangle the House of Representatives and get them all on the same page, then they're going to have to find a way of working with Democrats. I mean, if there's something that this reminds me of, if you remember back in 2018, Democrats won the House of Representatives. They were going to be controlling the House of Representatives come 2019. There was another effort to have this big end-of-year package to avoid a government shutdown, and Donald Trump and conservatives derailed that. You had a shutdown that started, I think, on December 22nd. It was the longest shutdown in U.S. history. It stretched all the way into late January. And in the end, the Republicans had to fold because while they took what they saw as a principled stand on all of this massive government spending, the reality was eventually they would have to compromise with Democrats who had some influence in Congress. And until they did, the government would stay shut down, and eventually the Republicans started to get the blame for it.
On just to address that question you mentioned, Justin, of the kind of like who's in charge and the precedent that it sets. We had this email from Stephen in Belfast, actually, who also made, I think, what's a really important point about the kind of irony of it all, which is, he said, Musk rails against unelected bureaucrats, and yet he is unelected and is clearly controlling policy in Stephen's view, e.g. this spending deal. And you just wonder again how that narrative could be used to undermine Donald Trump, and to what extent he might say, oh, actually, I can kind of see the problems of this and how this might not be good for my image of I am against the corrupt establishment and I am very much in charge myself. I'm not like, a puppet, as he and others have accused Joe Biden, for example, of being. you've also kind of got this weird situation now, to the conversation we were having about the way this is all unfolding, sort of in real time as we're recording this episode, where you've got, I just was looking at X and Elon Musk kind of praising specific Republicans that come out and say that, how they're going to vote and things like that. And again, that kind of creates this like quite, I don't know what the right adjective is, but like a kind of quite febrile, is that the right word? Like a kind of an environment where it's sort of like okay to actually really have a go at people if you don't agree with the way that they're voting on things, and kind of getting perhaps the average person stuck into the debate and conversation around this in a way that they might not. I mean, obviously, again, not everyone uses X, but if you even just sort of hang out on it for a minute, it would be hard to have missed all of these kinds of posts that Elon Musk is sharing.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, Marianna, because it's not just the aggression and the potential nastiness that then follows from a tweet or an X or whatever we call it, and you know all about that because you've been on the wrong end of it, but also further down the track, but not that far down the track for some of these politicians, the real chance that Elon Musk funds, Anthony, people to run against them, to primary them, and for them to lose their entire careers.
Right. An explicit threat from Elon Musk on X on Wednesday was that people who vote for this bill shouldn't be around in 2 years. And it was one that Donald Trump also echoed, saying that anyone who supports this without raising the debt limit, without giving Republicans what they want, should be primaried in 2 years. And that is, for a lot of these members of Congress, their biggest concern, because they occupy safe congressional districts that have been drawn in a way where Republicans have a big advantage. And so they don't really have to worry about the general election. What they have to worry about is challenges in the primaries and getting unseated by someone who is more loyal to Donald Trump, who has the support of Donald Trump, who can paint the person who is currently in office as being part of the establishment who's voting for business as usual, because that is a four-letter word in conservative politics these days. There's a member of Congress from Houston, Dan Crenshaw, who is an outspoken conservative, but he's also been one who has been a little skeptical of kind of this conservative populism that Trump represents. And he was targeted by one of these social media influencers, one of these conservative people that Marianna referenced, who accused him of supporting this congressional pay raise. And in that post accusing him of this, Elon Musk then, also as Marianna referenced, replied to that and amplified it. And Dan Crenshaw, I won't read his Twitter response because it was heavily laden with obscenities, but he was really upset about what he felt was the mischaracterization. Yeah. He went off on this guy. He called him an incel and said he didn't know what he was talking about. And I think, you say febrile and you think, this is kind of a frenzy, a feeding frenzy and a fever swamp. I think that shows exactly how tense things are getting and the kind of pressure that rank and file Republican members of Congress who do want to keep the government open and do understand the political reality here, which is that they need to work with Democrats to get something done. And so there's going to have to be some give and take and some compromise. That's the political reality, but they're running up against kind of these people who are hardliners and intransigent and would actually prefer a government shutdown and to bring the whole system crashing down rather than some sort of an incremental advance in what they want and moving the ball to when Donald Trump takes power, and maybe they might have a greater chance of enacting their policies then. They want change and they want to bring the system down right now. And that's why you see people like Dan Scavino, who's an advisor to Donald Trump, celebrating what happened the past couple days and saying this is a great time to be alive, and other conservative commentators really feeling like they've accomplished something by bringing this compromise and bringing this government funding bill crashing down around everyone's ears.
Anthony, let's go back for a second and talk about who might potentially emerge as winners in this. I mean, we've talked quite a lot about the very obvious protagonists. I suppose a less obvious one, or a less famous one, is Hakeem Jeffries, who's the head of the Democrats in the House.
Yeah, Biden is pretty much disappeared from the scene, and I mean he's the outgoing president, so he's not going to be around in next year. It is going to, I think, be Hakeem Jeffries who is going to become the face of the Democratic Party. And because this is a congressional controversy, because this is a congressional story, I think he has the opportunity to really advance himself as the voice for Democrats. He's a congressman from New York. He was essentially handpicked by Nancy Pelosi to succeed her as the Democratic leader in the House of Representatives. He's young. He's African American. He is really good at speaking extemporaneously, of being quick on his feet. When you have floor debates, when you have him showing up on the political talk shows, I think he could really rally Democrats, offering a contrasting view to what Republicans are, and highlighting what I think could be the divisions within the Republican Party and the chaos within the Republican parties, and offering a different path. So he is definitely one to watch, and one who could end up coming out ahead in all of this, because let's be honest, he is the highest ranking Democrat left standing, at least in Washington, D.C.
Right, that's it. The WhatsApp, 44330 americast@bbc.co.uk. The hashtag is Americast. Marianna will tell you now about the Discord.
Yes, you can send us questions and comments on Discord. The link to the server is in the description to this podcast. And remember that you hear Americast first and in full as a podcast on BBC Sounds.
See you all later.
Goodbye.
Bye.